Thank you, Margaret and Tom, for leading our worship this morning and setting us up for understanding the resurrection of Jesus and celebrating that resurrection today. As you read the Gospels, several things are very obvious, but the main one is that Jesus had profound impact upon people's lives. People were never left indifferent in an encounter with Jesus. People either wanted to give up all to follow Jesus, or they wanted to kill him as a blasphemer and a heretic. Jesus never left anyone unmoved. And we want to just take this morning the opportunity in John's Gospel, chapter 20, to look at 3 impact statements from the friends of Jesus about how meeting Jesus impacted their lives. Normally when we think of impact statements, we see them in the context of law courts, when somebody's rights are being violated or violently attacked or abused. Usually a statement of the negative effect of that kind of sin and evil upon the human experience. Well, the first few verses of John chapter 20 read quite like a crime scene. Mary and her friends go to the tomb to where Jesus was laid on a Friday evening to prepare his body for the last remaining time. They go to where the tomb is and they find the rolled door, rolled stone away from the entrance. They look in and see the corpse of Jesus has completely disappeared. Shocked and overwhelmed, they run back to the disciples. I'm going to read sections verses 3 to 4, written or translated from John the Apostle's point of view. The disciples John and Peter, we ran to the tomb to see. I outran Peter and got there first, and stooped in and looked and saw the linen cloth lying there, but I didn't go in. Then Simon Peter arrived and went on inside. He also noticed the cloth lying there, while the swathe that had covered Jesus' head was rolled up in a bundle and was lying at the side. Then I went in too, and I saw, and I believed. Until then, we hadn't realised what the scriptures had said, that Jesus would come to life again. Like any crime scene, there seems to be a lot of confusion here. Doubt and despair in the lives of Mary and also in the disciples themselves, and yet a glimmer of hope that something amazing has happened. What are these impact statements of Jesus on the lives of these disciples? Well, we have Mary's first, then we have the disciples, and then we have also Thomas himself. Firstly, Mary moves from being a grieving person to a good news person, from a grieving person to a good news person. Mary Magdalene was a part of a group of women, wealthy women, who supported Jesus and his disciples in their ministry through financial resources and hospitality. The other wonderful thing really about Mary is that she's had her own impact experience of Jesus herself. She is described in Matthew's Gospel and Mark's Gospel as being set free by Jesus from several powerful evil demons in her life. It doesn't explain how those spiritual forces affected her, or when, or how long. It simply says that Jesus had set her free. And that might be a reason for her profound and powerful devotion to Jesus Christ. She was with her friends last at the dying foot of the cross. She was first at the first day, preparing Jesus for his last journey. So, we have this devotion in the cross and devotion in the tomb. 2 times she is asked, "Why are you crying?" as she sits in the tomb area. She's doing what any grieving person would do. She wants to be physically near the presence of the friend that she's loved and she's served. These stories are not trying to prove a point. Jesus is risen. They're trying to share an experience in their confusion and their grief. Two angels ask Mary the question in verse 13, "Why are you crying?" She doesn't pick up on the fact that there were angels. Maybe they weren't particularly bright angels. I'll leave that to you. But soon she becomes aware of the presence of another person, which she takes to be the gardener. And he asks the question, "Why are you crying?" And she says, "Please, if you know where you've taken him, please tell me and I will bring him back here." This is grief talking, isn't it? Why didn't Mary spot who Jesus was? I think essentially because she didn't expect to see him. Dead people don't walk. Dead people don't talk. Even in her grief and wish fulfillment, she wasn't going to be believing that Jesus was alive. It was only when Jesus used her name in that particular way that he had that struck her very powerfully when he said, "Mary." And she says, "Rabboni," and turned to him and wanted to embrace him and really love him afresh with their devotion. Jesus speaks to her personally and powerfully, and he does that to us. Each of us can come and meet that Jesus for ourselves. Because Jesus is alive, he is able to work in our lives. Some 40 years ago, I was reading this gospel and this passage, and the person of Jesus simply walked out from those words, stepped into my life, and gave me a choice: shall I follow him or shall I turn away? I chose to follow Jesus and have never regretted it ever since. And I'd encourage you to read this story and see Jesus coming out speaking to you. But this isn't simply a personal and private faith of an individual and their experience. This is a public faith, reality for groups of people and for the whole world. So, our first impact statement is Mary saying, "I have seen the Lord." She is the first person to witness the risen Jesus. She is the first person to take that witness to her friends and say those words, "I have met the Lord." From grieving, Jesus brings hope. The second impact statement are the disciples, and that's in verses 19 to 23. They were fearful people, and very, very fearful. If Jesus, their leader, had been killed, were they next on the list to be killed also? I imagine Peter talking to Matthew. This is just the way I think about things. He says, "Matthew, you're good with numbers. When you locked the door and everybody came in, how many people came in?" And Matthew may reply and say, "Well, being your accountant, Peter, I must have to tell you that's not an easy question to answer. But let's go. We left for Jerusalem with 12 people. Judas Iscariot betrayed us. And for some reason, Thomas is not with us tonight. So that means, with me included, we have 10 here." And Peter might say to Matthew, "Just count and see how many people are here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And everyone, with jaw-dropping amazement, looked at the one person in the room who shouldn't be there. It's Jesus, resurrected, available, public, able to be touched, able to eat fish, able to meet with them. Now, Jesus could have said, as they looked at him in jaw-dropping amazement, shut your mouth. If it had been a Yorkshireman, he might have put it a bit stronger than that. But he didn't say those words. What he said was, shalom, peace. Peace I give to you. And then he gives them a commission. He says, as the Father has sent me into the world, so I send you into the world. As I've come into the world to have impact upon people's lives, I send you as a Christian community out into the world to have an impact on others also. And it says in verse 20, they were overjoyed to see the Lord. They'd gone from being overwhelmed with fear to being overjoyed with God. Jesus brings hope to the grieving. Jesus brings peace to the fearful. This is the impact of Jesus on people's lives. And we come to the third story, which is Thomas. And he moves from profound doubt to a great decision. From a profound doubt to a great decision. Now, I feel, and many other preachers often feel this, that dear Thomas has been a bit typecast. He's been typecast as a first century Victor Meldrew. He says, I won't believe it. The disciples tell him, we don't know why he wasn't there. Did he go out for the fish and chips for everybody and bring them back? And while he was out there bringing them back, they say to him, we have seen the Lord. Well, it doesn't always happen like that. You know, you attend a boring church for decades. You don't turn up one Sunday, and then all of a sudden, revival breaks out. What a thing to happen. But this was no laughing matter for Thomas. Thomas was as grief-stricken as everybody else. So when they said, we have seen the Lord, he says very angrily, I saw him die. He was my friend. He was my Lord. And his story ended on the cross. We're not seeing 20th century cynicism here. What we're seeing is first century rage at these disciples' story. So, don't be surprised if you struggle to believe in the resurrection of Jesus. Don't be surprised if these things are hard for you. Thomas says, unless I see the nail prints in his hand and feel the wound in his side, I will not believe. 6 days later, the disciples are in the same room, same locked door, tallying up with the same people, and then one more appears. They turn and look to Jesus, and Jesus turns and looks to Thomas and repeats to him the very words he said 6 days ago. He says, come, Thomas, see the wounds in my hands. Feel the wound in my side. Stop doubting, but believe. But believe. And then in sheer astonishment, and also with a touch of amazement and worship and awe, Thomas utters those words which Christian theologians have been working out really what they mean for the past 2,000 years. He falls on his knees to Jesus and says, my Lord and my God. Jesus comes and declares himself to be that risen Lord, the one whom God uses to have impact upon people's lives. We can do that as well. You may be the grieving today and need hope for the future. You may be the faithful today and need the peace of God that passes all understanding. You may be doubting today. And all of those are completely legitimate. But take the opportunity and read this gospel for yourself. Be open to the impact of Jesus in your life. John the Apostle, in the last verses of this passage, says these words in verse 30. Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, in which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. I believe the resurrection of Jesus is the only way of explaining the phenomenal growth of the Christian church against immense opposition. There's a story told of Nikolai Bukharin in the 1930s. He was a 1917 Russian revolutionary who ascended the ranks into the Politburo in Russia. He was well respected as a philosopher, as a teacher in communist belief. He often would travel to different places and preach and teach against Christianity, affirming atheism. On one occasion, he goes to the city of Kiev, addresses a mass crowd, and tells them for an hour why belief in God is a foolish thing, is probably a dangerous thing, is something that you should not do, and you don't need to. He marshalled his arguments one after another, until after the hour was up, he turns to the crowd and says, "Are there any questions?" Well, not surprising, for somebody who's covered all the bases, nobody said a thing. Their eyes were simply on the ground. And then an elderly gentleman gets up. He walks up to the steps of the rostrum, onto the platform, and stands next to Bukharin. He looks at the great mass of people and says these words, "Christ is risen." And with a sound of awe and wonder, a massive crowd responds, "He is risen indeed." That's what we acclaim today. That's what these impact statements proclaim today. That Jesus Christ is risen. The resurrection is the only explanation why Christianity has outlived communism in the 20th century. It's the only explanation as to why Christianity has outlived empires in 2,000 years. It's the only explanation why people's lives are touched and changed because of this God. May that God bless you in the coming week with his resurrection life. To all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave them the power to become the people, the children of God. God bless you in this week. Amen.